Walk the Talk America presents Guns and Mental Health, a podcast for firearms owners, clinicians, and the curious public.
Welcome back, Mike. You came back from a place you weren't maybe going to return to for a while. What was that all about?
Yeah, I just got back from the New Jersey Gun Violence Research Center, which is a division of Rutgers University that throws a conference every year, the summit, I guess. And it brought me back to my roots, man. I never thought I'd be back in Jersey when I left in 2019 after I sold Eagle Imports, but I got back there. It was funny because I was having a call one day with a couple of my buddies that are from Jersey, and basically one of them asked when I was coming back to Jersey, and this is like 6 months ago. And I told him I was never ever coming back to Jersey, and he's like, "Really? Come on, man. Why won't you come back to Jersey?" And I said, "Well, you could just come here. Why won't you come to Vegas?" And he was like, "What would bring you back to Jersey?" And I said, "If I got paid to speak." That, and I threw that out there. And sure enough, the very next morning, Mike Anestis from the GVRC basically calls me and says, "Hey, we'd like you to be one of the keynote speakers at our event in September." So he got me back to Jersey.
How was it going back before we get into the conference and how that went? How was the return to Jersey?
Oh, it was fine. It was crazy. Newark Airport, that's an airport that I basically lived at, right? Because I was going back to Jersey 5 or 6, 7 times a year. But it's what they've done in Newark Airport, I hadn't seen in years. It looked like a completely different place. Uh, and I was going to East Orange, which is not, nowhere near where I'm from in the shore. But it was nice. I mean, it was kind of cool to go back and come full circle, sort of, with this. I never in a million years thought I'd be speaking in New Jersey about what I do, so it was cool.
So let's dive into it. How was the event? What was kind of your role in the speech of the keynotes for those interested of why they were interested bringing in Walk the Talk to speak at all? What do you got?
Well, so this is kind of building off of the momentum of the research conference, the gun harm reduction research conference, the national one that I attended in Seattle, right, where I was one of the speakers. This is a much smaller conference, but some of the same people were there. There was people that I had met, last year that were at this conference. And basically what it was is everything from social workers to researchers to organizations that we would consider anti-gun. Brady was there and Moms Demand Action was there. And I was asked to come be the keynote speaker, which was an honor, right? Especially when I realized that they had me closing the show. So I was the very last speaker to go. There were 4 keynotes. I was the only keynote speaker that's not a researcher. So that was kind of interesting. But the theme was, and there's kind of sort of this irony in it. Now, I don't see it that way because I don't think they do. I mean, I think they just enjoy listening to what we got going on in the firearms industry and Walk Talk America. But it was kind of about unity and how we can work together, right? That's what they wanted me to make my speech about. So it was easy. It was just basically me telling the story of Walk Talk America and what we're doing. But at that same time, the irony is you're bringing in the firearms guy to preach unity. You know what I mean? I feel like we've like flipped the script, where it's like Cobra Kai now. Cobra Kai are the good guys. You know what I mean? Like historically, we were the enemy or the ones that were accused of speaking some sort of division, and now we're the people that they bring in to talk about unity and bringing people together. And I started off my speech by just kind of meeting the audience where we're all at, right, as humans. I was like, we've had a rough 3 weeks, right? 3 weeks. We've had 2 school shootings. That poor lady who got stabbed in the neck. We had the Charlie Kirk incident, and I was just like, we've had a rough time as humans. We've had a rough time as Americans. I was just like, but I'm going to give you 45 minutes of hope. And that's kind of what my speech was about.
Yeah, you can almost add this to the list of things some people could tell you in 2018 that you'd say, not a chance of you coming in to bring unity in a conference with researchers and all of that. Wouldn't necessarily make sense, but now seeing all that you do, it's makes perfect sense of you compassionately showing other perspectives and other things that maybe that community isn't exposed to. What went over really well about your speech, and what questions did people have?
So my speech, I used a lot of humor. I had some old pictures, Jersey pictures of me that really went over well with the crowd. Uh, I think the biggest hit, right? Like when you think of all the things we do, it was definitely Kids to Kings, which is really cool, right? Because we always say that's kind of counterintuitive for many, and to watch like a majority of the crowd, especially come up to talk to me about Kids to Kings after I was done speaking was pretty awesome. I'm glad it really resonated with people. One of the things that really I thought was kind of interesting, and I always test things. Like I'm always like, okay, I'm going to say this. We'll see what kind of reaction the audience gives me. And at one point, I remember using my line, "Don't let data get in the way of saving a life." And like the entire room was nodding, and I was like, God, that's ironic that they felt that because they're researchers. It's all about data. But I think they understood what I was saying. I was kind of saying like, don't use the fact that we don't have some data that this stuff is saving 100,000 lives, right? I was like, a lot of it's anecdotal, but go ahead and tell me that putting a card in the box of every firearm that has free and anonymous mental health screenings is a bad idea, right? I was like, we can all agree, like it just feels right. And I saw everybody nodding. And I was just like, wow, I just told them to don't let that get in the way of saving a life, which is pretty crazy. But a lot of the people just had questions about, how I implemented this stuff. And I think people were curious about that. But Kids of Kings was the number one question that people had. I had literally a line of people after that wanted to talk to me about that program in particular. I think the video that we played in the presentation, the little 2-minute sizzle reel, and then showing the pictures of the kids at the NRA show really resonated with the audience. And it was a very mixed audience, right? You had all different people from different backgrounds there. But everybody was fascinated by that program. I think it's not something like 6 years ago I would have thought would resonate with these people. And it really hit home.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways it makes sense. You would think the data don't let it get in the way of saving lives. These people do data and get paid for it, but you'd also think that must be relieving in some instances. I know with like our TAP and Canon security project, maybe we're not giving as many discounted safes to make responsible storage devices more accessible as maybe the whole group would like. But like you keep telling everybody, hey, the win is just making it known that it's available, and this is just building momentum. And that message really seems to resonate. When you're right, you think that wouldn't fit, but it does. What were some instances that maybe push back on isn't the right word, but share different perspectives that were opposing of the ones that were shared in some conversations?
Well, there's one instance that was really interesting because we had these little breakout sessions in between keynote speakers, and I ended up in one session. I just walked into it because it was about safe storage. You could pick which session you wanted to go to, right? So there's 2 different sessions going on at the exact same time, which I always hate when they do that at these conferences, because it's like, I want to be in both. You know what I mean? Like it's a, but anyway, so I'm in this room, and I'm in there with the Brady people and the Moms Demand Action people. And I was pretty much, I mean, everyone kept turning to me because I was the only person from the firearms industry in there, except there was one other guy who owned a range in New Jersey, a gun range. And, he wasn't, I don't think he was there to make waves, but I'm the guy that everybody wanted to talk to because I kind of keyed up. Obviously I'm on the flyer, you know what I mean? And I was introduced as the firearms industry guy. So a lot of people were asking me questions in that one. And it was really interesting because we got into this conversation where at one point, I didn't want to give too much of what I was going to be talking about in my speech away at the breakout session. And I had to keep telling people that. I'm like, look, I don't want to make you guys sit through something twice, but at 1 o'clock when I'm speaking, I think a lot of this will be answered. But I kind of made this comment that the safety companies and the firearms industry is starting to really pay attention to this stuff. And at one point I was like, I believe we will be the leaders in the space of suicide prevention and all negative outcomes of firearms. And the guy from Brady, and keep in mind, he was a victim of gun violence. He did not share his story, but I knew he was a victim of gun violence at some point in his life. Because he'd said it when he introduced himself. Not only was he part of Brady, but he was a victim. So I do appreciate that somebody who's a victim of gun violence might have negative feelings towards firearms, or you lose somebody to gun violence, you might be swayed to think one way. But at one point when I had said that, he turned to me and he's like, can you show me any evidence that the firearms industry is doing any of this? And I literally had to look at him and go, wait till 1 o'clock. I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised. Like everybody kind of laughed, you know what I mean? But that was like sort of like the only time I felt like somebody pushed back against anything I said. But I knew that just came out of ignorance, right? Because he wasn't ready. He did not know I was going to come with what I came with. And I knew, see, that's the ace that I had, right, of my sleeve, is I know what I'm coming with. They've never heard it before. And that's how I always have to remind myself when I do these things. They've never heard what you do. So they're going to be fascinated. Like, even though it's like a record on repeat, I've heard the same song over and over again, I got to always remember there's a whole room of people that are like, wow, I never even thought about that, or I didn't expect that. And that conference proved it.
It is interesting after we called a debrief of just how large the disconnect is between that maybe research community that is researching negative outcomes from firearms and reality of, like you told me, somebody came up, wouldn't it be great if we had cable locks in the purchase of every handgun? And you're like, great idea. Let me inform you of something. And just the gap of the knowledge. That's why Walk the Talk's working on a Roots project that's going to bring the kind of latest and greatest and current safety devices to the research conference coming up. And it'll be interesting what comes out of those seeds they're planted of, hey, these are the products that the companies are actually working with now and that gun owners are loving. And where does their creativity take off? Just like it's kind of sounding with Kids to Kings of like, so curious and, oh, this is awesome. What's the next evolution? It's mind-blowing how big of a gap it is. And you tell that to somebody from the firearms industry that was their great idea, their mouth dropped. What? How do they not know? But that's just the reality it is.
Yeah. Something you touched on, like not knowing that, all firearms sold from a gun shop, or the majority of them, unless it's like a used gun or something. But even then, I think most people are putting that little lock in there. But I brought that point up in the breakout session, because one of the ladies was like, yeah, you think that more locking devices would be available to give to people. And I was like, well, there is a locking device almost in every gun. At least the guns that I sell or Ruger sells, they all come with a locking device. Whether that locking device is up to standard of how somebody wants to secure their gun, that's a different story, right? But I wanted them to understand that there are locking devices that come with this stuff, and that the gun industry should get credit for that. But talking about Roots, right? We have this Roots project, which is responsible ownership, outreach, technology, and safety. And I was able to bring that up during my presentation. And I wanted to make a point, and I played 3 videos. I played Kenny Barlow from Regal. I played the Boss Lock video. I played the Gun Alert video, right? And all of them had a safety product that was super unique. And I brought up a couple things. I was like, technology is finally catching up with where people want it to be when it comes to these things, right? Especially playing Keith from Boss Lock's video, where he sprays the the biometric lock or pad with Pam, and then is still able to open it. That was a huge hit with the crowd. Like, I actually had people come up to me after, and they're like, "I'm really glad you played those safety videos, because we didn't know that that product existed." And like seeing how those locks were opened with such ease, and being able to now push back against, politely push back against anyone who says, "Well, biometrics don't work, and what if you get your finger wet?" Right? Like, I think it helped the researchers to understand that the technology is coming away. But having said that, it also gave me an opportunity to explain to the research community and whoever else was in there that these products are available, but these companies have to make a living. And we can't keep expecting safe companies, and I'm guilty of it too, right? I've leaned on Canon Safe to give me free safes, right? And Gun Vault, right? Like, I do the same thing when someone needs it. But I was like, look, we have all this money that we put outside of the country for whatever it is that we believe in, right? Billions of dollars we send overseas. I was like, why can't we stop expecting these safety companies, who are already the stepchild of the firearms industry? Safety is the afterthought, right? The gun companies dominate, a lot of the accessory companies dominate, but when it comes to safety, people skip. And I got to walk people through how that works, right? Like, so think about, there's a room full of researchers, and I'm like, take the single mother from Compton, right? Who's just working 2 jobs, who wants to protect her family. She goes in to buy a gun. I was like, she's looking at $300 right there for the gun. Then you got the ammunition cost, right? Then you got some sort of holder, like a holster or something like that, to secure the gun if she buys that, right? Then I'm like, then we want her to buy a safe. Then we want her to pay for a training course. And I'm like, people, ask yourself, if she's on a limited budget, where is she going to skip? Right? And everybody got it. I was like, safety, right? Like, she's probably not going to buy the $150 cool biometric safe. Like, we might get lucky, right? She might just use what she can. But I said, we need to stop expecting these safety companies to not make a living. And I was like, maybe grant money could help get these things affordable, or make them more available for when people want them. And I didn't get any pushback from that. I think people agreed. It's like, we can come up with money for real dumb shit. Let's find, if this is important, let's come up with some money, so I can go to a safe company and say, look, like, we need X amount of safes, and guess what? You're going to help us, but we're going to pay you for it. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's a win-win for everybody, and we can get more of these devices in there. And, that was the other thing I wanted. I made a call for the researchers to research more safety products and how effective they will be and what people want, right? Like, kind of get out of that mind frame of all research needs to go to legislation and restriction that people aren't going to, half the country's not going to get behind. So.
Yeah. A big disconnect of exactly that. I think that your and I's vision of Roots and the potential of the project being able to have grant money and increase the research behind and use the latest and greatest storage devices instead of the cable lock, or again, just the disconnect where they're all advocating store your firearm separate from your ammunition. Any gun owner that's for owning a firearm for a defensive gun owner or defensive purposes, which I think was over 90% of our last survey, that's kind of a deal breaker. Someone's going to break into your home, which is a lot of the vision that goes through gun owners' mind. You're going, hey, hold on, wait a minute. I got to go to my closet around the corner. Can you just hold on? No. So speaking that way turns people off. So it is encouraging of what can come, just getting on the same page and not being so far behind. It's almost like the research community's working on a Windows 98 and doesn't even know of the big technological advancements that are out there.
Yeah, I think that's going to be the fun part about the research conference in November, because I had a lot of people that are like, I'll see you in November. And when I was talking about Roots and I showed the videos of the safety products that exist, and there's a nice variety, right? When you think of Regal and their biometric cable lock, then you think of Boss Lock, their slide locking mechanism, right? And then you think of Gun Alert. I think that was a nice mix of three. And those are just, I picked those three because they weren't just safes, right? Like they're just alternatives to the norm or what people think of. The excitement that the fact that I said there's going to be a table with these products at the research conference, that was fun to watch. Like they were like, we're so happy that you're bringing that table there. And a couple of the people were like, maybe the following year, every one of those companies got their own table. And I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. Like that's what we're building towards. Like we are coming. Like the firearms industry is now moving into this space to talk with you. You know what I mean? Not work against you or ignore you, because they need to know it exists. The firearms industry needs to know that these people exist, and these people actually can help you when they're looking for products to give out for their studies and their research, and even like suicide prevention and better mental health, right? Like those organizations that specifically try to tackle that issue in society, they need to know that these products exist. I guarantee you nobody knew those products. Like that was the first time seeing them in that entire room. And people were like, damn, that's pretty cool. You know what I mean? Like, oh, wow, I didn't know that exists. Of course you didn't. And I shouldn't expect you to know it exists. I mean,
and to be fair, I mean, a lot in the firearms industry aren't up to date with kind of the way you brought some of the not latest and greatest, but most kind of cutting edge where some of the technology is going to products, to where it's like you say, it's not their fault. But it'll be interesting, the collaboration of a research that has one of those products maybe combines with a cause of pause materials and campaigns to implement that, and then researching the positive impacts of just those types of things with maybe some walk the talk or other materials. How much more, I don't know, preventative, and gathering that insight from the participants and showing some positive data on something that's not restrictive.
yeah. So you nailed that right there, because my thing that we always preach, and what I was preaching there, was the message that comes with the safety product is just as important as the safety product, right? Like how to use that safety product. So I talked about the evolution of like cause a pause with Canon Safe, how Canon Safe has the flyer, and on the back of the free and anonymous mental health screening, they have the cause a pause. And then I got to read, I showed them the cause a pause video, which is very powerful in itself, right? It's the one where, I'm running towards the safe, and there's a heartbeat, and there's the pictures of my daughters, right? Like, and that really resonated. But then I also got to read them, bringing up, knowing that they're all researchers and they're all data driven, right? But knowing that they're right now, we got their heartstrings because they just saw something that probably resonates with everybody, right? Because I said, if there's two people that could stop me from doing something in a crisis, is those faces, right? But then, I said, look, this is an anecdotal story, and you know this, somebody reached out to Walk the Talk America like right before I was going, and basically said, I'm going to read this quote, right? And keep this anonymous, right? Because that's what we're all about. But the person just said, I don't want to get into too many details as I'm working on it and getting help. But I think cause a pause saved my life the other night. The safeguard I put into place stopped my panic. And being able to read that to a group of researchers, and that's when I kind of did the don't let data get in the way of saving a life thing, because that you know what I mean? Like, it's like, how do you, a lot of people in that room have that mentality of, if it only saves one life, then it's worth it. Okay. If it only saves one life, then all of this is worth it, if that's what you believe. Right. So it was really cool to kind of be able to like give them that message of, great, you can hand anyone a cable lock, but the message that comes with that cable lock could be more important than the cable lock itself. So don't give up, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Especially not everybody loves cable locks. Of it's not their preferred way to store it securely. And I mean, we're kind of beating a dead horse, but like again, if that's something the research community thinks is the latest and greatest, and don't understand, hey, a portion of gun owners think cable locks are just going in the trash. We've had some messages. Let's try to kind of fight that, but say, hey, that could save someone's life or that. But thinking it's such a great security product, but then the disconnect of where the kind of the top of the line more preferred options are.
Yeah, I really love giving these different perspectives to get people to think, especially researchers, because talking to Mike Anessis, and that was the reason I was there. I've known Mike for years. He runs the whole organization out there, and he was like, "Look, we want to bring you in to give a different perspective," because he's like, "I feel like we're stuck in the same circle, right? Like we're just going around and around saying the same things over and over again. So you're going to come up there and do your thing, and you know, it's going to give people a different look." And one of the things that I love about what I was able to do was when I was talking about the Armory project on one of the slides. You built my slide thing with me, so you know exactly what I'm talking about. But we have the Armory project slide, and I got to bring up how Gala was so forward thinking, right? And I was just like, this lady right here, the one that made me work harder, you know what I mean, at my job, when I heard about her, the one that made me uncomfortable in a good way. I was like, she was so forward thinking that, like, when she was trying to sign up gun shops for their safe storage project, which I feel like she's the only one who does it right in the United States. Um, uh, when she had trouble getting the gun shops to sign up because they were worried about the liability, I was like, she went out and got legislation passed, and it passed on a first shot, flying colors, didn't matter what side of the aisle you were on. That basically took away the liability of the gun shop if they gave the guns back too soon, right? But I was able to kind of then transition that into, maybe we need to do more research on things like that, right? Like, and just get the researchers to think like, oh yeah, there's some positive stuff that we could research that doesn't always have to lead back to restriction or something so terribly negative. Um, because I heard maybe 10 times that day about the guns are the number one killer in children, using that 1 to 18 range, right? And I got to go up there and basically say, like, I don't care if it's number 1 or number 7 or number 12. It's not going to change how hard I work to stop something negative when it comes to a firearm. Like, we need to get out of this mind frame, like, where we're stuck in the same conversation over and over again. So it's kind of cool to give them that different perspective of like, yeah, maybe there is something. So like, one of the researchers that was there came up to me after, and she was like, I would love to research your Kids to Kings program if you'd let me. And she was from Yale. And I was like, 100%. Absolutely. I would love that. However you want to measure it and however we determine what success is. I am that confident in the Kids to Kings program that could be something positive. That doesn't matter where you stand. You're going to be like, okay, this is cool. You know what I mean? Because that was a huge hit. So
Yeah, it's nice to see that momentum because I think you built off it in what was it? Seattle was the first research conference where you spoke. There was lots of curiosity, but maybe still watching from afar. And then now building up the momentum. Hey, let's have specific things that we could really do something around. And then you and I are going in November to Phoenix this year to probably even continue that momentum.
yeah, and I'm really excited about it, man. I really saw like genuine excitement on people's faces that we're going to be doing that with the table there now, and having that presence. Um, we really may have hurt ourselves as a community and an industry for so many years, just kind of ignoring these things, and rightfully so sometimes, right? Like sometimes you do feel it. You do feel like, I'm walking in a room and people expect me to be a villain. But I feel like now that we've kind of hit this stride, here we are, like with our own solutions, and they're so different that we're just going to get a totally different reaction from people. And I give it to, we worked on the speech together, but like, that's how I came out, right? Like I came out with the whole, like, we've had a rough 3 weeks as Americans. Like, dude, right there, I'm giving the crowd a chance to breathe. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't matter how you feel about guns. We all feel the same way about the last 3 weeks. It's been horrible. And then just watching that crowd just kind of defense comes down, and it's like, all right, what is he? Where's he going with this? Uh, I got to be honest. It was a lot of fun. I love speaking at these events. It's more so than speaking in front of the gun people, because I feel like that's the echo chamber, and then everybody's of course going to support and be like, yeah, I love what you're doing. But going over to this crowd, being having the honor of being the guy who closes the damn show, um, you know, being the only person who spoke that wasn't a researcher and from the firearms industry, like that's the greatest thing. You know what I mean? Like, I love it.
And from some of the conversations, it sounds like you bring some relief of a different perspective where some of these researchers are too close to an objective that they're maybe trying to push or achieve. And you just have a different perspective of like, oh, yeah, that's obvious that it's not going to work because X, Y, and Z of this belief. And they're like, oh, and then others in the room will be like, see, I told you we needed to do that. But you give the freedom for others to have that different perspective, or it seems to unclog the gears that seem maybe they're frustrated hitting a stalemate.
Yeah, there was a couple of instances where I had researchers totally backing me up with what I was saying, like literally kind of just echoing, like, yeah, especially they had a panel that I was on. So I spoke, then we had another breakout session, and we came back for the final panel, which was where all the Q&A took place for whoever for the four speakers. And there was a couple people that stood up and almost just made a statement as opposed to a question, saying like, hey, like, I love what Mike said, and we're right. Like, we need to break out of all the research that we do is always so negative. I think the ERPO thing really resonated, right? Like when I did the whole like, hey, where I come from, ERPOs get people killed because they don't seek help. And I walk them. Here I am at stage 2. Now I'm afraid to get help. I don't want to lose my guns. So I hit stage 4. That's not where we want to be, right? So people understood that and got that. There was this one breakout session. The second breakout session I attended was about talking across the aisle, which in that room meant talking to Republicans. I think they should have just called it talking to Republicans, which is hysterical. But it was so funny because the people from Brady, and I want everybody to understand, like the people from Brady and Mom's Demand treated me with respect as I did them, right? Like we were sitting there chatting and discussing things, right? Like not everything is fire, not everything is, you damn gun people, right? But it was kind of cool because at one point, like the lady from Brady's like, I have these conversations with these government officials that totally agree with me in the office when I say, like, we need to raise the age limit to buy a gun. Um, and they agree with me, and then they go vote the opposite way. And I wanted to be like, is the name of this breakout session, should it be how to force somebody to believe in what you believe, or is it about talking across the aisle, right? Like if that's the end game is like to go in there and somebody brought up ARs, right? And at one point, they were like, yeah, banning ARs. And I'm like, see, I was like, I said, does anyone know the worst school shooting? Like the biggest school shooting? Can anyone think of it off the top of their head? And what's wild is not one person in there knew it, which was Virginia Tech, right? Like it's crazy. Like people could tell you the worst, right? Which is Mandalay Bay, but that wasn't a school shooting. That was just a mass shooting. But they're all bad, right? But the one with the most amount of loss of life was Virginia Tech. And I'm like, what did that shooter use? Does anybody know in the room? And I'm like, it wasn't an AR. And I was like, it was a Glock, 2 Glocks, right? And it's kind of funny, like this one guy who actually owned a gun range, he didn't speak up until I said that. He's like, he's right. I was like, so, we're in here once again discussing banning ARs, but not thinking about what are you trying to accomplish? Is it saving lives? And that goes back to what I always tell people. I'd rather have you say, like, I just wish all guns would disappear, than say, I want to ban red sports cars to stop drunk driving, right? Like that's essentially what you're saying when you say this stuff. So it's really interesting how quickly they can kind of get back in that stuck mode that, guns are bad and we just got to find a way to stop. I was able to make the point in my speech about a lot of researchers point to the effectiveness of ERPOs when it comes to saving lives and stopping suicide. And I'm like, but every one of your states, suicide has gone up as a whole. So I was like, what's more important, stopping suicide by firearm or stopping suicide as a whole? We should be wanting both of those numbers to go down simultaneously, right? Because if one goes up and the one goes down, or you claim it went down, and one goes up, we've really failed. If the idea is to save lives and stop negative outcomes. So I think that resonated with a lot of people. Once again, it resonates when you see everybody nodding their head, right? I look, is like the person sitting like this, or are they nodding their head? So
Yeah, not to get you on a Jake soapbox, but that is very frustrating. I consider it under one of my strong suits with all the things that we have to do, but it's very frustrating how much work it does to kind of dissect it, see where it's from, and all the little loopholes that come with it. It's not easily digestible for the average American or person. It's very challenging to get data, and then it seems like some organizations are using it for a specific purpose or means of, oh, we wanted to kind of show this, so this is the data we're going to show, that's kind of cherry picking. Or your favorite one, the 0 to 17, the child violence isn't really well defined age groups, that we struggled with creating your PowerPoint last year of which age groups are good to use, which sources. That's where a lot of my frustration comes in, too.
yeah, it's still a conversation that I had privately with a couple of researchers. And if you ever want to get a researcher to run away from you faster, is literally challenge that number and then bring up like the moral compass of the country. And I'm not here to be preachy, but I was just like, yeah, like as an 18-year-old, like we can send you off to war to kill with a automatic weapon. And I was like, you could star in a porno, you could work at a strip club, you can vote, you could do all these things, but like you're considering an 18-year-old a child. And I was like, you're taking out 0 to 1. And it's so funny because they kind of all like, yeah, I see what you're saying. And then it's like, oh, look, there's free Coke. over here. Like there's free soft drinks. It's like it makes people uncomfortable to have that discussion, but it's a discussion that needs to be had because once again, I feel like they create that number to create some sort of urgency in somebody to do something, and it's a little disingenuous. Like I don't, if you're 30 years old and you die of gun violence, or you're 18 and you die of gun violence, this is all bad. I mean, it's like nobody's going to say, well, there's some good stuff, right? But like, I think that people need to understand that that's a number now that most gun people, I think, associate with anti-gun. So I think it doesn't help, right? And I would love for somebody to actually do a study from 0 to 17. Just do a study from 0 to 17. I want to see what those numbers look like. And maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe it'll come out to the same. But I want to know what that number is. I don't like zero being 0 to 1 being thrown out, because I know that's considered like a baby, but that's still a child, and a child can still be shot accidentally or on purpose, right? And still be a victim of gun violence. So I just wish that they had that number. It doesn't change how I and you and most of our listeners feel about this. We all think gun violence is bad, but I think it's just a little intellectually dishonest. And I think research can be done with honesty and good intention. And it doesn't always have to point towards how do I get some kind of provocative number that I can use against the firearms industry. And I got to make that point to the researchers. Because of the past, we just look at research as something that's just going to be used against us, period. And they got to change. We can both change that attitude by working together. Let's get some good research out there. I talked about our research, and I actually gave them. I was like, "Listen, all of you are going to shoot a hole in this because it's done the way we do it." But we have I got to tell them how we started. We got like 200 something people, and then we got 2,400 people in the second one, and I think it got some people's attention. Right? I was like, we can get Walk the Talk America, and you can get real gun owners to answer questions that historically we always took personal, because Walk the Talk America is a trusted source. And why can't some researchers come to the table and work with us so we can really examine some of these numbers and make it up to par for education purposes? I think it can be done. I don't believe that all researchers have bad intentions. I think a lot of them just never had the opportunity to work with gun people.
Yeah, I mean, you were brought to this conference for that very reason of just like showing different perspectives that they've maybe never encountered before, but aren't their typical, out of their kind of circle of thoughts, and presenting new ideas, new technology, new devices, to where let's see what grows from the seeds you planted here. Just like you said, the research, it was like, oh, that's nothing. But then when we published the results with 2000, we got a lot of messages. Hey, this is pretty cool. Oh, this is kind of substantial. I believe that survey was the highest percentage of negative opinions towards red flag laws preventing people from seeking mental health care that ever existed, with a previous number, what was it, 8 or 9% just in New York. And then this last survey in January is 50%. By the way, we currently have another deep dive survey into red flag laws going on now. You can check it out on our website. We've got 450 people responding now, and some big partners like guns.com and others going to help us in the next couple of days promote it as well. So we'll see if we can get 3,000 or see what the data says on this one.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to get this information. I'm excited to work, like I said, with groups that we historically we either were never invited to or decided not to go to. I think we could change a lot of hearts and minds, and I think people are ready for it. I really do. I think people are ready for some other alternatives, because I think smart people realize, like, man, we just keep talking about the same stuff and keep fighting about the same stuff and arguing about the same stuff. And I think people are ready. I think it was a breath of fresh air for some of the people in there. Um, everything from just the PSAs and campaigns we do, to cards in the box. I think a lot of people are ready for the firearms industry to just keep run with it. Now you're going to always have your politicians that, run off something, or people that make money off of the negative outcomes. That's just life. They're always going to be there. But there's a lot of people that are neutral or just don't know, and that's who we're talking to. So it's a lot of fun, man. If you'd have asked me if I would be doing stuff like this, I would have never. And I love it because I get up there and I literally say I represent the firearms industry. Like, and when they ask me where my funding comes from, and I say from firearms companies, that just takes away all of the firearms industry doesn't care. You know what I mean? Like, like they're not expecting that. They think, okay, wherever the guy gets his money from. But once again, just like the guy from Brady, when he turned to me and said, "Do you have any evidence that the firearms industry is doing anything?" Because he didn't know what I was about to say when I was speaking. I guarantee you, he wouldn't expect that I'm funded strictly by firearms. He probably thought I was getting government grant money from something, or just donations.
Yeah, no. And to give the researchers and the healthcare community a little credit, we know some 2A industry companies that have told you later on, hey, we were just kind of watching from the sideline before we really wanted to get active in supporting to kind of see you make it through and some of those things. So maybe some of the biggest partnerships with that are yet to come.
Yeah, 100%. I think so. I think the sky's the limit, right? With some of the partnerships that we could have with the research community. One of the things that I was able to say to the crowd was, if you ever have a question, I need you to contact me, right? Like, whether you're backing some sort of legislation or you're curious about something, right? I was just like, contact Walk the Talk America, because we'll give you that perspective that you might not get from somebody else. That will make you think about the way you might approach this research or the pitfalls you might have. So once again, this is bringing people together. We got some decent comments here. One of them, let's see, emphasis
I've
on
been
the
working
number.
my way through trying to multitask poorly.
And I'm also just like blabbing. So
I was trying to get a little confirmation on what number in comparison Tovis was looking for clarification, whether it was the survey portion of our numbers versus the January and what we're doing now. So we'll see if that comes through. But one question Tovis had earlier was with Mom's Demand, Brady, of just how they are. Are there like some that you have good relationships with, or they have good kind of neutral, or some very anti-gun? They were wondering how those organizations and similars when you're in that environment differ.
no, I think when I'm there publicly with them and we're talking, it's all polite. Where we disagree is kind of like when somebody makes a statement like banning ARs, right? Like the lady from Moms and Man talked about. I talk to politicians all the time about banning ARs, and they think it's a good idea, and then they go and they vote against it, right? So to me, like, everybody is polite. I don't know. Like, one of the ladies from Brady followed me on LinkedIn after the thing, and she was just like, "Such a pleasure meeting you," right? And I always say this, right? Like, Brady is going to get through to some gun owners. They are, because there are a lot of gun owners that think there's such thing as like common sense gun laws. You know what I mean? Like, not, and I got to say that in the speech, right? I was like, gun owners aren't monolithic. Like, Brady's going to have their audience. So when Brady is talking about responsible storage and locking your gun up in a time of crisis and preventing unauthorized access, who am I to judge that? Because that sounds just like us, right? It's where we differ is when it comes to restriction and legislation and preventing gun rights. Where we're exactly the same is the way the way we approach responsible gun ownership. So there are some overlaps where, you know, people from Moms Demand and Brady have literally like told me, like, yeah, we have a lot of gun owners part of the organization. Or somebody will say, like, I'm a gun owner, right? It's just like, okay, you're a gun owner, but where we're different is fundamentally how we feel about the Second Amendment and who should have their rights denied or whatever. You know what I mean? Like that's really where the difference is. But I mean, there's a couple of people in there that are suicide loss survivors. And guess what? I'm a suicide loss survivor, right? Like I lost Bill. I lost the president of my company and one of my best friends. So um, you know, I'm not big on trashing them. I'm more big on let me give you another perspective. And if I got to politely disagree with the person from Brady or Mom's Demand while they're in the room, I'm going to do that. And I'm going to say my reason why. And if they can challenge me to the point where they make me look like I don't know what I'm talking about or I'm not reasonable, then so be it. But it hasn't happened yet. And I don't think it's going to. Because I'm not big on like moving goalposts on people, and I'm not big about whatabouts, but there are times when you have to kind of give that different perspective. And then every time I give that different perspective, everyone always follows up with, well, then how would you do it? Or what do you think? Right. And then I'm able to explain what I think the answer is or where I'd like to see the energy go into. So being talking to the Brady people, you know, like one of them asked me, like, what are the things that we can work on together? Like, what types of things do you think would bring people together? And I said, how about we research how many gun shops would be involved in responsible gun ownership campaigns and suicide prevention campaigns if they got an insurance break and you incentivize them you know, by giving them a discount on their insurance. I was like, do you think that's a good idea? Does that sound reasonable? And every one of them, yeah, I do. Right. And people in the room agreed. Like researchers were agreeing. Like, yeah, it's something I never thought of. There were people in there that said, I never thought of that. You're right. Like it would be kind of cool to see that. And I'm like, gun companies would be willing to do it. Sometimes they need that to be incentivized. And then once they're in and they're doing it, they get excited about it. Like Gala, I mean, that was, you know, when we've had the discussions with Gala, her always her biggest fear when she brings a gun shop on is if no one comes to store the guns there, I don't want them to lose their steam and their excitement for this. Right. Like, and I'm like, oh, that's easy because we just need to explain to people that just the fact that you're giving people hope and that, you know, so you don't open up the program and we have all these people that are in crisis handing over the guns to the shop. It doesn't mean it's a failure. You just gotta, it's a slow rollout, right? We're changing culture. We're making things available and we got to build trust within our communities. But I think like those are the things that people need to hear. They need to hear different alternatives of how would you approach this problem? What do you think is the answer? I love being able to tell them the reason why I just do not like the idea of red flag laws is you only care about taking away the person's firearms. You don't care about anything else. And you don't give somebody help. And there has not been one person who's argued with me when I said, if a human being shouldn't have their firearm, I don't think they should be driving and walking around. Like if you're that bad, then I really question whether you don't need to seek help. And we all know that we can have erratic behavior and be going through crisis. I mean, we see people do it publicly, right? We've seen Kanye West when he's in one of his episodes, right? But to tell me that Kanye shouldn't have a gun over having access to knives and medication, and all that stuff that we leave people with, and we're like, give me your gun. Usually we're sending in a police officer to take a gun. I was on a podcast earlier with a former cop, and he totally agreed that enforcing red flag laws is not comfortable. And there's not a lot of cops that want to do it, because you show up to a bad situation and you say, give me your gun. And you walk out the door and you're like, good luck out there in life. You maybe can get this back later. And I mean, that's not cool. Like, there's nothing that says we really don't care. You know, we only care about this one thing. So I love being able to give those perspectives and get people to think.
Absolutely. Mike, we got another podcast coming up in 30 minutes, but let's wrap this one up. Touch on everything we got going from the auction. Another shout out to the survey. Feels like you and I we've got a busy schedule this suicide prevention month and into the fall, but give the audience a little bit about what's going
on. One last thing I just kind of want to address, Tovis, is the public health thing, right? I believe the public health crisis of firearms, and it was made a public health crisis of firearms, was so researchers and people could get more money. I just want to put that out there. It doesn't bother me that people made it a public health crisis. I don't take that personal. I think people are looking to get funded, and that's why I think they do that. I'm not even sure if that's what he's asking, but when I see public health crisis and firearms, I literally smile, because I know how much money goes on behind the scenes for these things. And it just cracks me up.
It is crazy stepping into like Gallo's world when we help her with projects, and how much funding is what almost like you hate, of like, show all these data points to prove that this money was successfully spent, to where if Walk the Talk got that same rules for funding in 2018, there wouldn't be any funding. Of how many mental health surveys, how many lives did you, all these data points that are almost obstacles, instead of to prove and get funding and continuing to do all the great things, instead of moving the goalpost a little bit and not be so data centric.
Yeah, I was talking to my wife, because she was like, how did the thing go? You know, and I was like, it was great. And at one point, somehow we got on the conversation. She's like, is this a problem that people really want to solve? Because I was talking about how much money is in research, right? And she's like, if you tried to solve it, and I'm like, yeah, that's a great point. You know what I mean? Like, there are a lot of people that make a lot of money keeping this fight going, and that is on our side too. You know what I mean? How am I supposed to give you money if there's no boogeyman? Yeah, how am I supposed to get the money from you if I don't fearmonger and have a boogeyman? And I get it. Like, we got lawsuits and things like that we got to fight, but it's almost better to have a supervillain when it comes to fundraising than kind of being like, yeah, let's save some lives. But that's my soapbox, I guess, that I got to get off. But anyways, listen, we have some good stuff.
Clarifying point. You're talking more about the lobbyist on the 2A side, right? Of the fear mongering of fighting negative legislation. Is that what you were saying?
Well, I think both. I think both sides do it, right? Like, if
no, I'm more the legislation side. Not the fear to own a firearm, correct?
Oh, no, right. The legislation side, right? Yeah. Like,
that's what I figured, but I wanted to give you that opportunity to clarify on the legislation.
Yeah. No, obviously the legislation side, right? And that's just anything, right? Like, hey, we're the only ones that are going to help you. You know what I mean? Like, I think there's less money in actually solving problems than there is fighting. Because fighting taps into emotion. You know what I mean? So it's like, look at us, we're out there knocking these people out, and it's like, okay, I got to fund that. You know what I mean? Because they're coming for it, right? But let's talk about the auction. September 30th, we have an auction. Pot of Gold Auctions puts it on for us. We're doing it biannually. This is the second one, or this is the second one this year, and we got the most amount of guns donated this year, which or this one, which is great. Just go to, I don't know, did you put the link in the? Yeah. Okay. So go to the link, please do not be afraid to overpay for one of these guns because it's going to a good cause. It's not just about getting a good deal, but there are some great guns in there. There's Glock, donated a bunch of guns that are like custom designed for WTTA. There's some really cool guns. I mean, we got Arms Corps. I probably should not go down the names because I'm going to forget somebody. But go on there and you can see all of the guns that were donated, Bursas, Kel-Tec. There's all kinds of guns. EAA, just to name a few, and then I'll piss everybody else off by not mentioning it. But it's a great fundraiser for WTTA, and I can't thank Pot of Gold Auctions enough for putting it on. But we need your help, and who couldn't use a new firearm? Like, that's fun. Right? So you donate to a good cause and you get a new cool firearm or an accessory. Like we have some companies that are on there that it's not just firearms, right? We have an air gun on there. We have Saber pepper spray donated, a couple things. Mantis, yeah, like there's accessories and everything like that. But please check it out if you get a chance. And what else? Am I missing anything else?
Survey, and then I think the survey is the biggest thing.
Yeah, I mean, if you are on social media, if you could share a post about our survey. This is a survey by our industry for our people. We use this in a number of ways. One of them is to politely push back against some of the statistics that are out there, and the way they cherry pick them. I think it's just a great thing. I think people, we do have safes. Gun Vault is going to have some safes on there. I think they're in transit, so we do have some safes on there. But anyways, so that's the auction. There was a comment. I know I'm all over the place. Sorry, but please share the survey. Get it in as many people's hands as you can. I need as many eyes on it as possible and people who want to take it. I think if we can beat the number of people that took it last time, we'll only be taken more seriously by researchers. And like I said, our research can go to positive things. Our research can go to things that can go to positive legislation, right? Like maybe we could start getting people to take a look at what would it take to get insurance companies to give a break to gun shops, or how do we get all 50 states to remove any liability to gun shops that participate in some sort of safe storage program, right? Like that's what I want to see, because that's positive stuff. And I don't care how you feel about guns. I think everybody could be like, if guns are going to exist, then that's a good idea. So please push the survey on all your social media channels. We greatly appreciate it. And
this survey, we're diving deeper into red flag laws. After the first survey that was a little bit more general, doing mental health, gun culture, all those things, we asked what our audience wanted to dive deeper on. Now that we got SurveyMonkey, that gives us a little bit more tools to dive deeper in the why people believe, that was kind of missing from that first one, to where this will go till the end of September as well. And then we'll have this information ready to go to the research conference in Phoenix and kind of keep up momentum with those conversations and have a little bit more of the why. Share it around. I think we were all disappointed on maybe just the diversity of the respondents, because we know gun owners are so diverse, but as far as the results, we're just being curious.
Yeah. And people are listening, man. I mean, they're listening and they're reading the surveys. They're the researchers, a few of them I know are fascinated by it. And a lot of them say the same thing. I mean, I got a few of those at the, I got a lot of that at Aspen when I was at Aspen, the Institute of Health, but I got a few this time around too. Like, oh, I never thought about the potential that it could scare somebody. Red flag law could scare somebody out of getting help. Maybe we need to look at these things, right? Maybe we need to look at how many people wouldn't transfer a gun like in Nevada, where you can't come and take my gun from my house if I'm in crisis because we'll break the law, right? Like some of these things could have a negative effect, and they need to know that. And this research helps when they see we got 2,500 gun owners to say how they feel about red flag laws. I mean, they got to take that serious. So please pass it around as much as you can. And we'll be back in 20 minutes.
Yeah, we'll have to change our shirts. So it looks like a new podcast.
Yeah, right. Yeah. 20 minutes. We got Waco Hoover from the American Legion coming on. So if you guys are around and you want to hear that, I think it's going to be a great show. He also runs a convention called MCon, which is very cool. And we're going to talk about MCon. We attended MCon last year. They donated a booth to us. It's in Vegas. It's very much like a Freedom Fest, but it's for the military. And we're going to talk about the work that Waco and I are doing in suicide prevention and mental health and how we can help our veterans and where we failed our veterans. And we're going to talk about all that stuff. So it's going to be a pretty cool show.
Perfect. Thanks everybody for joining. Check out that auction. Even if you don't find an item you want to bid on yourself, spread it around. Maybe your friends or family will find something they like, and take that survey and spread it around to anyone you think that might be interested in it. And we'll see you in 20 minutes.
Thank you.